Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Mr. Wiz here. So we have been spending a lot of time building our world in Unity, and today we're going to add some animation to our world. So if you are new to this, if you haven't done the previous lessons, you should definitely go ahead and do that. Today's lesson is going to be pretty awesome, but we're going to be adding to the things that we already have. Now we're looking at animation. I'll be honest with you, animation is both very simple and also very complicated. So if you do it right, it's not that hard, but it is very easy to make mistakes with animation. So we're going to start with simple, and then as this video progresses, I'll get into some of the little bit more complicated stuff later on. There will probably be more animation videos down the road, though, just to let you know, this is still at the beginner level basic Unity animation. Okay, so here's the world that I've made so far. Let's just check it out right quick. I've got my car, I've got my world, I've got some fireflies in this world. I also have some clouds that I made in the last lesson. I did edit my clouds a little bit since the last video, just so you guys know. I moved them higher up. I made less of them, and I also made them bigger so that there would be fewer clouds in the sky, but that they would be larger. I also gave them the ability to cast shadows. So if the clouds go in front of the sun, it will cast a shadow on my world, which I thought was a pretty cool effect. So just a couple things that I did differently than the last video. The fireflies are pretty much the same as they were in the last video. I may have made the area a little bit bigger so it covers more of my map. But other than that, they're pretty much the same. I love these fireflies. They're so cool. Okay, so what we're going to do today is a few things. But as I mentioned, the big idea is we're doing animation. So animation just basically means that something in our world is changing. Now, I know with animation, we tend to think of movement, but movement isn't the only form of animation. Animation can take on lots of different forms, but basically means that something is changing. It's maybe it might be its position, it might be its rotation, it might be its size. It could be all sorts of things that could be part of animation. So the first animation that I want to do with you guys, since we are building this world and we spent so much time on it, I thought it would make sense if, while you were exploring the world, time was passing by. In most big games, RPGs, and things of that nature, where you have worlds, while you're exploring, the time goes by. And what I mean by that is that you would have daytime and nighttime, right? So right now, my world is stuck in nighttime. I have this skybox here with the clouds and the moon, and it's very much nighttime. But I want to create a world where it changes, right? Where the sun rises and sets, and the time of day and everything changes. So that's going to be animation. Basically, I'm going to animate a sunrise and sunset. I know that sounds complicated, but it's actually not that hard. So follow along with me as I get started. First thing I want to do is I'm not going to want this skybox anymore. The skybox that I'm using right now is literally a photograph. That's all it is. So if we're looking at it, it's basically a 360 picture, right? That's what the skybox is. And most of the skyboxes that you download in the asset store work the same way. They are just 360 pictures. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create my own skybox that is not an image, that is actually there to represent a sky. And this is pretty cool. So in my assets, I'm going to go to my material folder. So I'm going to double click on my material folder, and we're going to create a new material. So just like we've done 1,000 times before, we're going to right click in the material folder. We are going to go to create. We will select material, and I'm going to call this material, I'm going to call it new skybox, just so I know what it is. Or I might call it my skybox, might be a good name for it. But actually I do like that. I'm going to call it my skybox. It doesn't really matter what you call it, just so you know what it is, right? But I would include skybox in the name, so it'll be easier to find later if you go to search for it. Okay, so I have a new material called my skybox. Now we're going to make some edits to it. So over here on the right-hand side, we've made materials before, but all the materials that we've made up until this point have been standard materials, materials that you put on 3D objects. And up here where it says shader, you're going to see where it says standard. That's telling you that it is a standard type of material. Since we're building a skybox is not a standard material. So we're going to click on where it says standard, And these are the different types of materials you can make. There's actually quite a few here. There's so much you can do with Unity. It's crazy. But we're going to go to the section that says Skybox. And now we have some different types of skyboxes. Again, there's a lot of stuff you can do with Unity. You may have seen cube maps and things like that in the asset store. I don't love them. What we're going to do is we're going to do the one called procedural. That's going to make the most sense for our game. So procedural. Okay, so I've got my procedural skybox created. You'll notice down here where it shows the skybox that it is now looking very different. It doesn't look like the other skyboxes. It now looks like a square. You can kind of see the plain image in there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and drag this skybox that I've made and replace it. So drag and drop it into my world. There we go. Let's zoom out a little bit so we can see it better. So there is my skybox that I've just created. Not very fancy looking, but of course we can make changes to it. So over here where it says sun, the first thing you're going to notice is that we can choose different things for the sun. So we can choose no sun, which doesn't really make sense for what we're doing because we're going to animate a sunrise and sunset. So we need a sun. There's also a simple sun. So we have simple and high quality. If you're looking at the difference between these, what is really the difference between simple and high quality? The difference is the way it looks to the player. The simple sun is literally just a circle in the sky that's creating light, right? High quality is more like what you would see in real life. We can't look directly at the sun, right? And even if you put a camera and point it at the sun, you're not going to see a perfect circle. It's going to create a flare, a little halo, an aura effect around it because of how bright the sun is and how sensitive our eyes are or camera lenses are. You're always going to get that kind of aura around the sun. So high quality is the more natural, it's the more realistic look of the sun. So I would suggest we leave high quality on since we are going with realism in our game. So sun size allows us to change the size of the sun so we can make it smaller or bigger. Again, if you're building this on Earth, there's no reason to change that, right? So maybe if you were doing an alien planet or something, you might want to change it. But I'm going to use Control Z to undo that change that I made and go back to the original, which was 0.04. Sun size convergence. This has to do with that flare, that aura we were talking about. So if you wanted it to be bigger or smaller, you could adjust that as well. Again, I'm going to leave it the way it was. So let me undo the change I just made. There we go. Atmosphere thickness. Okay, so this could be a pretty big game changer in the way that your world looks. Right now, the atmosphere thickness is set to 1. So that is a standard blue sky atmosphere like you see in my world. Oh, by the way, if you don't see your sun right now, I should probably pause myself. Time out. If you don't see the sun on this skybox you just made, here's why. I need you to go to where it says directional light. And as we learned before, the directional light represents the sunlight, right? So here's the cool thing about procedural skyboxes like the one we just made. If I change the direction of my sunlight, look at what happens to the sun in my skybox. You guys seeing that? The sun is literally moving. When we used those pictures, I had to manually line up this directional light to match the picture. But now that I actually have a procedural skybox, the sun moves when the light moves. So if you can't see your sun right now, that's because it's below the map. You need to go ahead and bring it up by changing the rotation of your directional light. Okay, so once again, I've got my directional light there. I've got my sun there. Let's go back to the skybox and keep on changing it here. So atmosphere thickness is what I was talking about. So right now, I've got the blue sky. That's a very normal atmosphere. So atmosphere thickness is talking about the thickness of the atmosphere, the thickness of the air and the air molecules. The reason our sky is blue is because of our atmosphere. Let me say that again. The reason our sky is blue is because of the Earth's atmosphere. If you look at pictures that are taken on Mars from the Mars rover, Mars does not have a blue sky. And it doesn't have a blue sky because it has a very, very, very thin atmosphere. So if I go to atmosphere and I make a number less than 1, I am creating a thin atmosphere where the sky is probably going to be, if there's no atmosphere at all, it's going to look like this. It's going to be black, just like space. Space has no atmosphere, right? So if the atmosphere's thickness is 0, you're looking directly into space. If it's 1, that's kind of normal Earth atmosphere. But it might be less than 1 if it's really thin. Maybe your game takes place on a high mountain. High up in the mountains, the atmosphere is thinner than it is down at sea level. So maybe you have a 0.5 atmosphere if you're really high up in the mountains. That might make sense, right? So you can kind of decide how thick your atmosphere is going to be. When would it be thicker than 1? Well, let's take a look at what happens when I make it thicker than 1. You see how the sky is starting to turn yellow and orange? What does that look like to you guys? Have you ever seen any pictures with the atmosphere? Maybe it looks kind of like this color. This is similar to what we would see with air pollution. If your game takes place in a city that has really bad pollution and there's a lot of carbon dioxide that's getting up in the atmosphere is going to be thicker because of all those gases that are being released into the air. And a thicker atmosphere turns colors like this yellow and orange colors. So this would be a good sign of pollution. Air pollution, right? Smog and things of that nature. So having a number bigger than 1 means that the atmosphere is very thick. Now notice if it gets too thick, it'll actually block out the sun. Because the atmosphere is so thick you can't see the sun. That's crazy, right? So you need to decide how thick you want your atmosphere to be. I'm going to leave mine at 1, which was the regular Earth atmosphere. But you can pick something else. Now, down here we have tints for the sky and for the ground. For our game, ground tint doesn't really matter because you're not going to see it. From the perspective of the player, they're going to see the ground that we gave them. So they're not going to see the Skybox ground, which is this brown one here. So this could be any color, really. It's not going to matter to the player because the player is not going to see it, right? Even that bright red, the player doesn't see. But if you were building a game in a different scenario where they might be able to see the ground, then that might be important, right? Okay, so sky tint does make a difference. You don't have to tint the sky. Let me start off by saying that. You'll notice right now I have not changed the original sky tint, and I have a beautiful blue sky. I'm going to get rid of that red just because it's bothering me. There we go. Okay, so I don't have to change the sky at all. As I rotate the sun in the sky, it's pretty realistic colors, so I'm not really worried about the tint, but I could if I wanted to. Again, maybe you're making a game that's on an alien planet, and you want your skybox to be a different tint than this normal bluish sky, right? So if I wanted to make it a greenish tint, I could do that. Maybe I want it to be a reddish tint. Maybe my game is on Mars, and I want the sky to be a red tint because of all the iron oxide in the air or something. I don't know. Is there iron oxide in the air on Mars? Probably not. I'm the wrong person to ask that question. But in a lot of video games, you'll see different colors in different planets, right? So feel free to change the tint if you want to, but if your game is based on Earth, you probably don't want to change the tint. You probably want to stick to the original. So I'm going to go ahead and do Control-Z, undo those tint changes. But they do look pretty nice, right? So if you're ever building a world where you want to have kind of a pretty sky, you can go with purple, you can go with orange, you can go with whatever you want to. So I'm going to leave it normal. Okay, and then exposure is once again going to change kind of the way the sunlight works. And it's another one of those things that I'm not going to change. So Control-Z to undo that. So honestly, I didn't change much about my world at all. Did I change anything in my skybox? I don't think I did. Usually I'm very creative and I change all sorts of things. But I actually really like the standard setup because the standard setup for the skybox is great for if you're building a program on Earth. Okay, so I've got my skybox. Everything's good. Let's see how it works in game. So the sun's over there. I've got my clouds in the sky that I made in the last video. And everything looks good. Okay, so remember this video was not about skyboxes. That was just a small little tangent. This video is about animation. So what I want is I want my sun to move in the sky. Now, as you already saw, what causes the sun to move in a skybox that you make yourself, the procedural skybox? The sun moves when the directional light gets rotated. So we are going to animate the directional light to create a sunrise and a sunset. You guys ready to do this? Let's do this. Okay, so in order to animate anything, you first need the animation window. So if you go to Windows, up here where you got all your different tabs, if you go to Window, you've got these different options here. All of these, by the way, pretty much open new sections in your Unity. So we're going to go to where it says Animation, and there is an animation and there is an animator. We're not going to mess with the animator in this video. We're just going to mess with the animation in this video. So I'm going to click on Animation, and it creates this new window for me. Now, to keep my screen nice and organized, I'm going to drag and drop this Animation tab down here next to my Project and Console tab. So you don't have to put animation there, but I like putting animation there because it allows me to easily switch back and forth between animation and project. If I can get it to click correctly, there we go. So I can easily switch back and forth between them because normally I wouldn't need both those tabs open at the same time. That's why I put animation there. But in fact, I'm going to save this layout because I like it. So let me go ahead and save layout. I'm going to call it the animation layout. Boom. Okay, so I've got my new tab called Animation, and I am ready to start animating. So here's what we're going to do. Before we click on anything down here in the Animation tab, make sure Directional Light is selected. Okay, so I've got my Directional Light. Before I animate it, I need to decide what do I want the starting information to be for my Directional Light. So over here I've got position, rotation, scale. We've learned in the past that the only thing that really matters is rotation. The other numbers don't make a difference at all. So I'm going to reset the rotation back to 0, 0, 0. So my X, my Y, and my Z are all going to be 0 right now. Okay? So right now, my sun is over there, and it's either a sunrise or a sunset. I haven't decided yet. But my sun is over there, and this is going to be the starting position of my sun, unless I decide to change it. Do I want the sun to start somewhere else in my world? Let's see. My car is right there. So the sun's kind of behind me. I like that. So this is a good starting position for the sun. All right. So now that I've decided where I want the sun to start from, I am ready to start my animation. I do recommend that you also start with a rotation of 0, 0, 0, or if you don't like that, just change one of them. Change like maybe the Y if you want the sun to rise from a certain part of your map. So like maybe you want the sun to rise from over there. You could do it that way, right? Decide what part of your map you want the sun to start from. But so if you want to change the Y rotation, you can. But let's leave everything else at 0. Oops, I just messed that up. Control Z. There we go. You know what? I think I'm going to have the sun rise in front of me. Let's do that. So I'll have the sun rise at a Y negative 180. There we go. So the sun's going to rise in front of me and it's going to set behind me. That seems nice. I like that. Okay, so I've got the sun where I want it. I am ready to start animating it. So here's how this is going to work. Make sure directional light is selected. It needs to be highlighted blue. And then, down here in this new animation tab that we have, there's a button that says Create. I'm going to go ahead and click Create. And now it is going to create a new animation. Let's name it. So I'm going to name this one Sun. I'll just call it Sun. I don't need to call it anything else. Now, it is saving it currently into my material folder. That's not really a problem for me. I can always move it later if I want to. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save. And now the animation called Sun has been created. Something else that automatically happened is over here in the inspector window, there is now an animator that says directional light. So I have just created an animator for the directional light. And now we're going to go ahead and create the animation. So this part is mostly pretty straightforward and pretty simple. So I hope I don't lose you. I'm going to keep it as simple as I can. Down here where it says, right down there, where it says add property. We're going to go ahead and click add property. Now keep in mind, directional light is still selected. So we're adding the property to our animation. And now we're picking what type of animation we're doing. I have two options here, transform and light. I can pick those two because the directional light object has the transform component and the light component. Here's the cool thing about this, guys. Here's the cool thing about this. If you're going to animate something, you can animate literally any component it has. Any component that you see over here in the inspector window, you can make an animation for it, and you can make that component change. So today, for this video, I'm just going to change its position, its rotation. I'm going to change the rotation of the directional light so that the sun's position changes. I'm not really going to worry about the rest of it, but if I wanted to, I could create an animation to make the sun change colors. That'd be kind of cool, right? I could make an animation for any of these stats in the inspector window can be animated to change. It's a very, very fun and simple way to make changes in your game is with animation. Okay, so going back to what I was saying, I have transform and I have light. I'm going to select transform. Then they're basically letting me select what am I changing inside the transform component. So since we're doing directional light, we're not changing the position, we're changing its rotation. So I'm going to click on the plus sign behind rotation. So here is the beginning of my animation. These diamonds represent moments in time. I forget what the term is for those. Oh, I wish I remembered what the term was for those. There's a name for them, and I've gone blank. If I remember, I'll put it in the comments of this video. But yes, these diamonds represent the stats that it's going to have at a moment in time. Like an earmark, if you will. I don't think that was the name of them, but that's what I'm going with right now. Okay, so they created two of them. It created a starting one and it created an ending one. So as an animation, you need to have a beginning and an end, right? Right now, both the starting animation, the starting property, the starting value, and the end value are identical. Because it's assuming that we're going to create an animation that loops and restarts. And in fact, we are. Most of animations loop. So the starting and the ending are identical. They both match. All right, that's what I wanted to mention. They both match. All right, now above that, where we have our little times here, this represents how long the animation is going to take. So you see where it says 0, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 55, and then 1. The 1 does not represent 1 minute. It does not represent 1 hour. It actually represents 1 second. So right now, by default, it has our animation set for 1 second. So the first thing I need to do is decide how long do I actually want this process to take. In my game, how long should it take for the sun to go all the way around the Earth? Now, in the real world, it would be 24 hours. But in video games, we don't usually go by real world time, right? Think about the RPGs that you may have played. How long is 1 day in our world? That's really going to be completely up to us. For my game, I'm thinking 5 minutes. I'm thinking 5 minutes for the sun to go the whole way around the world. So that means for 2.5 minutes, it'll be daytime, and for 2.5 minutes, it'll be nighttime. So that's what I'm going to do. You can pick a different time for yours, but I'm going to go with 5 minutes. All right, so right now it's set for 1 second. How do I change this to 5 minutes? So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to zoom out. So over here, I'm just going to use the wheel on my mouse and scroll back, and that allows me to zoom out and zoom out and zoom out. So I've got 5 minutes. Well, no, I'm sorry, that's not 5 minutes. That's 5 seconds. Remember, this is measuring in seconds. So how many seconds is 5 minutes? Remember, there's 60 seconds in a minute. So 5 times 60 would be, should be 300, right? So I'm going to zoom out until I get to 300, because that is 5 minutes. That's when I want my animation to stop. Still going, still going, still going. There we go. All right. So to get my animation to end at 300, I need to click on, do you see how there's 2 diamonds there? We're going to click on the one on the top diamonds, okay? I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to drag it. Oops, I'm dragging them both. I don't want to do that. Undo. Control Z, undo. All right, let's zoom in. I only want to grab the one on the right. I don't want to grab them both. Why are they both selected right now? Here we go. I'm going to grab this one. And this is the one I'm dragging out to 3 minutes. So let me zoom out, drag it out to 300 seconds. 5 minutes or 300 seconds. Here we go. So it should be right around there. Now that's not exact. If I zoom in, I can probably try to get it a little bit more exact. I'm not super worried about it being exact. But yeah, if you zoom in, you can get better time. So 300 would be right. Oop, oop, oop. Oh, so close. All right, maybe I do want it to be exact. It's not really that important. I'm just being picky. There we go. So my animation is going to start and end in a total of 300 seconds, which is 5 minutes. All right. If I hit play right now, will it be animated? No. Because I haven't told it what change I want it to do. So here's what I want you to do now. We're going to zoom in to where that 300 second mark is. Now, if you use a different time, whatever your time is, right? I want you to zoom in to where that's at. Oop, I got too far away. And I want you to click right above it. You see that white line I just made? Maybe I need to zoom in some more. That white line should appear if you click at the time. If you click at 300, that white line appears, okay? So here's what we're going to do. We're going to now, over here on the left-hand side, there's a red button that says record. The red button is what allows you to save the data of our animation. So I'm going to click record, and with that white line there, I now need to decide what I want my animation to do. So I want it to rotate around the sun, which is the red axis, the x-axis, right? So the sun's starting over there. I need it to rotate. Oh, actually, I went the wrong way. I want it to come up at first. So I want it to rotate all the way around. It's going to go down over there. It's going to keep going. Keep going until it gets back to where it started from. Now, as I'm doing this, I want you to notice that over here, where it shows my X rotation, that number's been changing. Okay? So I want it to go back to where it started. Now, it started at 0. The equivalent would be 360. Okay? You should have learned this in math class. The degrees in a circle, if you go the whole way around, is 360. So in fact, let me just type in 360. So what this means, if I did this right, it's going to start with a rotation of 0, and it's going to rotate around until it gets to 360, which will put it back in the same spot. Okay? So I'm going to click on the red record button again to undo my recording. Be very careful with the record button. Only have it selected if you are changing something that you want to be part of your animation. Because as long as that red button is turned on, any changes that you make are now part of your animation. It is very easy to make mistakes and mess up your animation just because you left that button on when you didn't mean to, right? Keep in mind, if you accidentally mess something up, Control Z to undo. All right. So I think I did my animation correctly, but I'm not positive. So here's what I'm going to do. My record button is not turned on. I'm going to zoom out to where I can see my whole thing from start to finish. There it is. And I'm going to, with my mouse, I'm going to click at the time frame, and I'm just going to drag it to the right. And what this allows me to do is this allows me to quickly see the animation. So I'm able to quickly see the animation that I made. And from the looks of it, it looks like it's working. And if I look over here on the right-hand side, I can see that the only thing that's changing is the X. Nothing else is changing. So it looks like it is working correctly. Now, if I wanted to watch it, I could hit play here, and this will show it to me in real time. The real time is quite slow because this is a 3-minute animation I made after all. But here we can see in real time with the little play button on the animation section, the sun is slowly rising, slowly rising. It is moving, right? All right, I'm going to get out of that. Now let's go check it out in actual play mode. Here we go. Moment of truth. So in play mode, the sun should rise kind of in front of me. And it is moving slowly because I did give it a 5-minute animation. But I think it's working. Yep, there's the sun. I can see it peeking out from behind that tree. Sunrise. Looks good. Oh, look at the shadows being formed by the trees. If your shadows are not updating, which they should be as the light is moving, if your shadows are not changing when the sun moves through the sky, you may have set your directional light to baked. If that's the case, you should switch it to mixed. And you should rebake your lighting just like we learned about in the lighting lesson. Yeah, the sun's moving. We got a working game, guys. So as I'm playing my game, as I'm exploring, as I'm doing things, the sun should rise and then eventually set. After about 2.5 minutes, it will set. And then it will be nighttime for about 2.5 minutes before it goes back to day. So I have a simple working animation that is the sunrise and the sunset. And I'm very, very happy about that. So let's go ahead and get out of play mode. And I did tell you guys, I'll give you a few different examples of animation, and I will get more complicated as we go. So let's do another animation. Remember a moment ago I said you can animate literally anything in the inspector window, right? So what else might I have in my world that I might want to animate that might be different than position or rotation? What about that fire that we made? My campfire. Let me zoom in on it here with the F button on my keyboard. My campfire, if I open it up... Oh, why is it not letting me open? My mouse pad has been weird lately. Sometimes it doesn't work. There we go. Okay. So if I select the fire object... No, not the fire. The fire object. I put light on my fire object. You guys remember doing that? Well, a real fire doesn't always have a constant light. Sometimes the light flickers. So what if I wanted to animate my fire object and have the light change? I could do that. Let's do it real quick. All right, so how do I create the flickering fire? Well, very easily, I make sure that my fire object is selected that has the light on it that I'm going to be changing. I go down here to create. I'm going to create this new animation called, I'm going to call it Fire Flicker. And I'm going to make it one word because it's usually better to leave things as one word when you're naming them. All right, so I've got my new animation called Fire Flicker. What do I want to change? Maybe the brightness? Maybe the color? I don't know. Maybe both. We can change both. So I'm going to click Add Property. And here's all the things about it that I could change. I don't really feel like changing the particle systems, even though I could. I don't really feel like changing the audio, even though I could. I'm really only focused on the light for this one. Well, so if I click on the light, look at all these different things I can change about the light. Well, the ones that I said I wanted to change was the color. So I'm going to go ahead and click the plus sign behind light color. And I'm also going to change the light's intensity. Notice you can do more than one thing inside of our animation. So now I need to decide how long do I want this animation to last before it loops back. 1 second's not bad. I could change it. So all I have to do is drag that top diamond to whenever I want it to go. So maybe it could be a 2-second loop, a 3-second loop, a 5-second loop. Let's do 2 seconds. All right. So I want it to start and end the same. So I'm actually not going to change the 2-second one. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put some times along the way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on around the 30-second mark right there. So after 30 seconds, I'm sorry, that's not 30 seconds. I keep on saying that. That is half of a second because 1 is a full second. So this is half of a second. So at that 30 mark, which is half a second, I have to hit record. I almost forgot. You have to hit record if you're going to make changes, right? So click on record. And now I'm going to decide what I want to change. At that point, I'm thinking maybe the color will be a little bit more yellow for a little bit. Ooh, that's too yellow. Maybe like that color. And then the intensity, maybe it's only 1. That's not bad. Okay. And then at the 1 mark, let's set it to red. And maybe the intensity is 0.5. I'm just making things up here, guys. I'm going to do another one at 1.3. We'll put the intensity. We can actually probably leave it at 1.25. I might not need to change that. And then what color do I want to make it? So it's going to be going back to the original color. So actually, I might leave that one alone. I might not put anything at 1.130. Let's just see what happens. So rather than setting it in my game, I can click the play button over here in animation, and it loops through it. So here's what I've got right now. Okay, that's not bad, but it's too slow. It's too slow. Setting this up for 2 seconds was a bad idea. We need to make it a much shorter one. So I'm going to get out of the playing, and I'm going to also click on the record button again, so I'm no longer recording, and I'm just going to move these diamonds. So maybe I need this all to take place in a much shorter time. Maybe I want this to take place in a half a second. Maybe I'll have it stop at 30, and I'll have these happen at other times. So I can move these whenever I want to, really. And now I just hit the play button again there. That's too intense. I feel like I'm at a rave. Okay, so maybe I went too intense with these changes. Let's go back to record, and let's make some edits to them. So on that one, I had the intensity go to 1. That was too much. Let's do 1.5. What about this one over here? This one was 0.5. That's too much. Maybe we can go back to 1. And maybe I'll do one over here that's at 1.5. Let's see what that looks like. Oh, that's not bad. I think I need another color, though. Let's do another yellowish color there. This isn't terrible. It's not terrible. I'm going to get out of record. So you kind of see what I'm going with this, though, right? What if I make them all really close together? What if I make all these changes happen very fast? Oh, that's way too fast. Okay, so I'll be honest with you guys. I don't love the fire animation I'm trying to create. I don't love it. I don't love it. Maybe I should have gone with a longer time and made the changes more subtle. Maybe that's what I should have done. I don't know. I'm probably going to delete this animation. So in my fire, down here where it has the animator, I'm going to click on those dots, and I'm going to remove that component. It doesn't need an animator. I liked it better without it. But you guys kind of see where I'm going with this, though, right? Anything you have in your world, you can animate. Any stat. Maybe I want my light bulb to flicker. I can come over here to where that light bulb is in my world, which is actually part of the house. And I could have this change. I could create an animation for this called light bulb. No, not light bulb material. Light bulb flicker. And I could animate the light, and I'll have its intensity flicker on and off. So we'll do 2 seconds for this one. I think this might work better than the fire I was trying to do earlier. And I want it to only flicker off for a short period of time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the red record there. And right here at the halfway point, we're going to have the intensity go out. We're going to have it actually die. That doesn't look good, though, because it's yellow still. Maybe I won't do that. 0.5. What does that look like? Oh, now it looks like it's a siren or something going off. That's actually kind of cool, not gonna lie. I might leave it that way. Let's go check it out in game. Doesn't look like a porch light anymore. It looks more like a siren now. But that'd be cool if you have emergency lights, something like that. Oop, I ran into a rock. Let me move my head out of the way so you guys can see it better. So you see how the intensity is brightening and darkening? That's kind of cool. All right, I think I'm going to go ahead and stop this video now. There is a lot more I could show you about animation, but I'm just going to go ahead and stop it here because I don't want this video to get too long. So the basic idea I want you guys to get from this simple animation video is that you can animate anything. You can animate position, rotation, color, light, anything that is a property that is in the inspector window can be made into an animation, such as my blinking light over here and the sun that is now moving through the sky. You can also, as we did with the fire, or at least as we tried to do with the fire, you can have multiple things get changed at once. So if you want something, for instance, to move around your map, maybe like a car or an animal, something in that nature, you could have it change its position and its rotation. So as it's walking, it's also turning. Or as it's driving, it might turn down different streets at corners and things of that nature, right? The more you have it do, the more keyframes you will need. That is the word I was looking for earlier, keyframes. So the more that you have it do, the more keyframes you'll have to create. But yes, that's the big idea. You can animate whatever you want to. Just make sure the record button is turned on when you are making your recordings and that you turn it off again when you are done changing things about your animation. All right. I hope you learned something new today. If you did not, I apologize for not making this more clear. I do plan on doing more animation videos down the road, which will be a little bit more technical than this one. We just kept simple loop animations here. Eventually, we'll do some animations with character animations and things of that nature. Okay, so if you're not already subscribed to this channel, please subscribe. If you did learn something new, please click that like button. And I'll see you guys next time.